Am I the asshole for telling my husband that he absolutely ruined the birth of our child? Hi everyone. Our daughter is now 8 weeks old, so obviously this whole argument has gone on a very long time. We both have been holding grudges and neither of us think that we are wrong. My husband does not know I am posting this, so I am going to keep it as anonymous as possible. So when I got pregnant with my daughter, my husband started in immediately telling me that I should have a home birth. I really do not know why he was so adamant on it, but he was. At first, I brushed him off and told him I would think about it because I was only 6 weeks pregnant, and the birth seemed so far off. Of course, it came quickly, and my husband would literally speak over me at doctor's appointments when my doctor would ask if I had a birth plan. This caused a few arguments between us in those 39 weeks of pregnancy, but I never really changed my mind. Eventually, my husband's mother sat down and talked to me, and she told me all of the reasons why they did not want me to go to a hospital for the birth. I expressed my concerns about, safety of the baby and myself, but just like my husband, she brushed me off. I ended up telling my husband that I would take myself to the hospital when it was time and that I did not want a home birth. He acted as if he didn't hear me. We met with a doula who was also very pushy. I felt overwhelmed and not supported at all. I was 36 weeks at that point. So, when I went into labor, I was 39 weeks, and I absolutely begged my husband to take me to the hospital where my doctor is. He wouldn't. He spoke to me condescendingly and called the doula instead. I was in labor for about 3 days, active labor for around the last 22 hours. I cried the whole time. I just felt something was wrong. I was scared and oftentimes they left me alone. The doula told me that if active pushing and labor reached 24 hours, I had to go into the hospital. I remember thinking that I could not decide which was worse, staying in labor for another 2 hours or having my baby right there. When she was finally out, I don't even remember wanting to hold her. I just remember crying out of relief. Obviously, I am okay now, but I did not have a good experience. On my first appointment after birth with my doctor, she was very shocked I had the baby. She was concerned. I was so upset. I told my husband that he absolutely ruined it for me. I truly never want to go through that again. I hear mothers say that they forget all the pain the second they have the baby, but I didn't. I love my daughter so much, but it was horrible, and it was entirely his fault. So, I told him that several times. He rolls his eyes every time and tells me how mothers are strong and how I am not trying to be strong. I told him that if we ever have another baby, which he wants, that I will never do a home birth ever again. His response is, "We'll see." I cannot possibly be TA here, can I? Everyone around me is acting like this is so normal, but it's not.
My dad came to my apartment with gifts for 2 young kids. I do not have any kids. Located my dad. I'm with him in the hospital. He has serious brain damage from a fall. I don't think he fell, but what do I know? Hi everyone. I wanted to wait until I had more information to post an update, but a lot of people were seriously worried about my dad and I, so I wanted to let everyone know what happened. I finally found my dad. My uncle took him to the hospital the night of the incident and was, for reasons I'll get to, ignoring our calls and texts. Anyone who bet on head injury and drugs, you're correct. You can cash out your chips at the front counter, haha. There was no second family. I wish there was. My dad would just be in drama-related trouble and not medical trouble. He's got a massive concussion and serious brain damage. Doctors don't know how he managed to even drive to my apartment safely. They think he was on autopilot, since he takes that freeway nearly every day. The phantom kids are his coworkers. His brain somehow blended the details of his coworker's life into his own. Coworker has a daughter who is married and has 2 kids, and the memories of being told about the girls mashed together with memories of his own daughter. Doctor says this is pretty common with head injuries. My uncle did find my dad and take him to the hospital. He did drive out to my area and scour the place looking for my dad, and eventually found his car outside Walmart around 10 p.m. Couldn't find him outside, but did find him out behind the building, harassing an employee for a cigarette. He grabbed my dad and kind of dragged him into the car and took him to the hospital. He just decided not to update anyone because he didn't want to stress us out. I don't believe him at all. I think my uncle is responsible for what happened to my dad and was avoiding us out of guilt. After I posted here, I went to work, and once I was clocked out, I went to my dad/uncle's place. Dad and uncle's cars were gone, only my aunt's was there. I went and knocked, but nobody answered. People in my last post mentioned carbon monoxide poisoning, and I was kind of freaking out thinking my aunt was just fucking dead inside, so I went around the house testing the doors and windows to see if I could get in. The back door was unlocked, so I just let myself inside and looked around. Totally empty. I even checked underneath the bed since a couple people mentioned my dad could be paranoid or scared and hiding. My aunt has this giant purse and it wasn't there, which confirmed to me that she was probably with my uncle. I went back and sat in my car and started calling any hospitals and jails that came up on Google Maps. Nobody had any answers and just said he wasn't there. I'd even called the cops for a wellness check just to see if maybe they could call around hospitals and get a different answer, but I waited until 11-ish and literally nobody came. No police, no family, nobody. I drive back home and try to get some sleep. Next day I call out of work and spend the day driving around my area trying to find my dad. Couldn't track him down, so I start calling hospitals again. There's 3 in my area, and while 2 of them gave me no, he's not here, sorry, one of them got really nervous over the phone and said I'm not supposed to give out patient information. I got US, kept asking, and she just got more and more flustered. Hung up and drove my ass over there and saw my uncle's car in the parking lot. It was kind of late, the sun was down, but I wasn't keeping track of time, so there were only like 5 cars in the visitor area and his was one of them. I do not have words to describe what I was feeling, but it was mostly just rage. Like, what the fuck? Hello, he's been here the whole time? I went in and tried to get the receptionist to let me see my dad. She didn't really want to let me, and I'm not proud of it, but I started freaking out. I slammed my hands on the desk, screamed, knocked over a magazine rack. I guess my tantrum made someone go talk to my uncle and aunt, since she came out to the waiting room and told the receptionist it was fine to let me through. If she didn't look so tired and sad, I was going to maul her, but the look on her face made me calm down, if you can call it that. Long story short, she took me to my dad's room. He looked terrible. None of you know my dad, but he's a beast. He's 5'11" with massive smile lines and bright, shining eyes. He's my dad, so I'm biased, but he's always so full of life. Laying in the hospital bed, he looked dead already. Sunken eyes, lifeless, and droopy face. He looked empty. I was able to talk to him for a bit, but he was totally out of it. He had to be reminded who I was several times and kept forgetting where he was and why he was here. Just like my dad, when I get upset, I get angry. I practically dragged my uncle out of the room and into the hallway for an explanation. After like 20 minutes of him making excuses and beating around the bush, another reason I think he's guilty, he told me what happened. Apparently Monday morning my dad fell, getting out of his car, and cracked his head really hard against the driveway. He got up and everyone thought he was fine, so they just went inside the house as normal. After a while he had a headache, so they gave him a couple prescription painkillers to ease the pain. Apparently that worked, so they just let him continue his day as normal. They only got concerned when I called and told my uncle what happened. He kept being so weird and evasive that I know there's more, but I couldn't wring his stupid fucking neck in the hospital hallway, so I just let it go. Here's what I think happened. I know my uncle and dad, and I know the history of this stupid family like the back of my hands. I think my dad and uncle got in a fight over something, and dad was either pushed down or hit in the head by my uncle. The altercation gets resolved somehow, and they go back to normal, but my dad's head still hurts. I learned at wth.reddit from the doctor that there were enough painkillers in his body to numb a horse, so I suspect my aunt and uncle just kept feeding him painkillers so they wouldn't need to take my dad to the hospital and admit what they did. I pressed my aunt about the painkillers, and she eventually halfway admitted that they weren't exactly allowed to have them at all. I suspect she bought them off someone else. They're likely addicted, and I just didn't know. I'm almost 100% sure this is their fault. If they had taken my dad to the hospital as soon as he hit his head, he would probably be okay. I'm staying at the hospital now and my aunt and uncle have left. Doctor says to not get my hopes up about my dad. But when doctors say that, it always means he'll actually be okay, right? That's how it always goes. They tell you that your family member probably won't make it, but they always prove them wrong. I'm sorry, but the rest of this is just going to be venting. You know what really gets me? I could handle all this. I could understand it. My uncle and aunt have always been less than reliable. I can believe that this could come from them. The hardest part is the lack of concern from literally anyone but me. I had to blackmail my brother, drama from a year ago, to even get him to agree to fly out. My mom doesn't care. Dad's family doesn't care. My sister kind of cares, but she doesn't really want to help or even come support me in the hospital with him. I am just so shocked that I'm the only motherfucker here for my dad, and he doesn't even know who I am right now. I have to take time off work, but it's not like my job gives me PTO. I'm fucked. My dad is fucked. My life is fucked. Why am I the only one dealing with this? My brother is the only one of us with time and money to help fix this, and I had to threaten him just to get him to come back home. I wish I had chased my dad when he left my apartment. I was afraid of him, but I'm even more afraid now. My dad is probably going to die, and I trusted the jackass who killed him with helping him. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with everyone? Why doesn't anyone give a shit about my dad? Why doesn't anyone give a shit about me? I could have been a better daughter to him. I could have visited more, called more, involved him in things more. I could have chased him when he left my apartment. I might have gotten hurt, but I would rather be beaten to a pulp rather than be sitting in a hospital room with my unconscious and probably dying father. I'm so fucking stupid. I'm sorry, Dad. Something has been impersonating me for over half my life. The first occurrence that I know of happened when I was 15. I was sleeping on the living room couch and needed to wake up early, so I'd set an alarm on an old digital timer for 5 a.m. The timer went off closer to 3 a.m. and failed to wake me up. My mother is a light sleeper and came out to turn off the alarm. As she entered the living room, she saw me bent over the coffee table rummaging around like I was half asleep looking for the timer. She says she laughed at me and said, "Dotro Fedman Lover, the timer is right here," while grabbing it from a side table and turning it off. By then she was standing right over the couch and looked down to see me fast asleep. The way she described it, the fear was so intense she literally felt her ears ringing and couldn't tell if the rummaging sound continued. But the girl who looked like me above the coffee table was gone. I thought it was a spooky story but ultimately brushed it off as my mom being half asleep. Then, over the years, there were other sightings, mostly minor. A few examples include a friend asking why I didn't come inside a party one time, because they'd see me in the driveway walking in. I was never anywhere near that party. Another time, in college apartment, I came home from work and my roommate asked me where I'd gone, sounding surprised. I gestured at my work uniform and said I was just getting home. He went a bit pale and told me I had been home earlier, going back and forth from my bedroom to my bathroom, and waved to him in the hallway with a toothbrush in my mouth. That was definitely impossible, but maybe he was just thinking of another night. A couple other things happened, but I always blamed them on the witness being tired or drunk or simply mistaken. The only thing I never really thought was it could actually be another person around town, both because this had happened in my home, and without going into detail, I have a pretty distinctive look and physical mannerism that make me recognizable. It would be weird if someone else looked like me and had the same unusual gait. In my late 20s, I went through an ugly breakup that ended with me kicking out my ex and having my brother move in with me for a while, for protection and peace of mind. A few weeks after the dust settled, my ex wanted to come by and pick up a few things, so my brother said he would stay home and I could leave the house while the ex grabbed his stuff. I promptly left and didn't return until I was sure he'd been gone for hours. The next day, the ex called me, furious, saying he knew I was home the whole time he was there. I explained that I was not home and didn't want to see him anyway, but he was convinced. He said, "I saw you watching from the upstairs window while I loaded my car, laughing at me." Then he sent a picture. For the first time, I felt convinced and suddenly afraid. There was a woman in the window upstairs and she did look like me, exactly like me. I have never been able to explain this and mostly found it fun to share when people start busting out their own paranormal encounters. Until now, because 20 years after the first encounter, I finally saw her myself tonight. I don't know what to do next, but I can't just keep pretending she isn't real.
In my idea show for calling my GF vain for ruining our vacation. My 28F had cystic acne growing up and had a lot of scars on her face. We met when she was 22 and her skin was much worse then. She used to cake on makeup because she said she felt like people would judge her for her scars and acne. I don't think anyone ever did, but she insisted she wouldn't be in public without makeup. She got into skincare and skin treatments. I don't know what they all were, but her skin has improved a lot. Her skin has a lot more smooth and she's a lot more confident. She used to wear baggy clothes, but now she dresses better and doesn't wear makeup as much. So that all great, but we recently went to Japan for a trip. My parents are currently in Japan for a year as they retired and always wanted to live there for a bit. My girlfriend and I went to visit them for 3 weeks. She told me she wanted to do some skin treatments there and was in contact with a clinic. I didn't assume it was a problem until we go there, and it turns out she was going to do a treatment every week. So for 1-2 hours every week she was there when the rest of us were doing other things. We moved around some stuff for her so she didn't miss too much, but she did miss a trip to Mount Fuji with her second treatment. I told her she shouldn't be dealing with her skin when we got to go to Japan for vacation, but she insists it was a big deal to her. I don't even notice much from the treatments, but she says there is a big improvement in the tone. She kept pointing out how she thinks her skin has improved and I called her vain, and that started a fight. I think she's way too obsessed with her looks. She is also now on a diet even though she has never been big at all and is going to the gym nearly every day.
I, 34F, found out my husband, 41M, did something unfathomably horrible, but I'm stuck? I'm shaking writing this post right now. I'm using a throwaway account. Yesterday I went on my husband's iPad after having a bad gut feeling in my stomach. I saw something I was not at all expecting. It was a message from a woman friend of his. Not to give too many details to not reveal anything, but it alludes to her being done with him due to things that happened the last time they hung out. It talks about them having alcohol and possibly cocaine since she talks about powder, and then it talks about him leaving her and her waking up alone, and it alludes to him doing something to her and she is not pressing charges but she doesn't want to hear from him again. I feel frozen. This does not sound like my husband, and I feel like I'm going through the motions of my life. I'm terrified to confront him since obviously I don't know who he is or what he is capable of. I've been acting normal while inside I'm dying. I'm numb. I'm scared. We have a daughter and I rely heavily on his finances. I don't know how we would make it if we left. My question is, am I a terrible person for acting as if I don't know about this or now until I figure out how to make it out? I feel guilty about this woman and what she went through. I just don't know what to do. I feel like I need a few months to get my life together without him before I can leave for my daughter's sake. He has never been a danger to us, but now I look at him as if he is a stranger. I found out my husband may be a monster. Can I go through the motions and not confront him for a few months while I make a plan? Does that make me as horrible as him? I'm scared. Answering questions I've seen quite a bit. What did he respond with? Answer: nothing. He never had a response. She said there is not a statute of limitations and not to contact again. 2. Where did I think he was that night, and why would I believe what she is saying is true? Answer: I looked back through my messages for that date she stated, and he was in fact gone to his brother's all night. I was unable to get a hold of him that night. That is a big coincidence in my opinion. Thank you for your kind and insightful advice. I'm taking it all in.